Does a massive shift for the 82nd Airborne Division signal that Trump is putting boots on the ground in Iran? I have the concerning story that includes military experts sounding the alarm coming up next. Let's begin with a retired four-star general who begins by saying Trump can't accomplish regime change in Iran with air power alone and puts him on blast for the mess he's created. And he has a couple of bleak predictions that, if realized, will greatly impact Americans.
Retired four-star U.S. Army General Barry McAffrey, a decorated combat veteran in Vietnam and a former battlefield commander in the Persian Gulf. General, there are reports that the CIA and Mossad hope to back the Kurds in the next phase of the war. Is it possible to achieve regime change with spies and militias?
No, obviously, nor with air power. So, look, we're in a situation right now where the most likely outcome, in my view, remember General Petraeus' famous saying, "Tell me how this war ends." I think you're going to end up with a failed Iranian state. And only half the country are Persians, the rest of them are various minorities, including the poor oppressed Kurds in, Turkey, Iraq, Iran, Syria, who've been brutalized literally for centuries. So I think you're going to end up with the IRGC will never give up. But we may well see a split in the 400,000-man Iranian armed forces with some attempt to interfere with the death grip that the ideologues have on this sophisticated, giant country of 90 million people. So the likely outcome, in my view, is chaos, incoherent. The only option the Iranians got left, in my view, are terrorism, international terrorism, and going after the oil supply and try and economically put pressure on the United States. But they're on their knees right now.
How long do you think this thing's going to last?
Well, there's rarely been a bigger political mess in a national security strategy than we're now undergoing. Mr. Trump made no effort to consult with Congress to gain support of the American people. Putting that aside, he also made no attempt to bring in our allies, not just the European great powers, Germany, France, the UK, but also the regional powers. So the war's largely unsupported by the American people, and we've outraged much of the global community that we're in alliance with. Now, having said that, Admiral Brad Cooper today with his presentation, rarely in history have we seen a more decisive impact without ground forces, in which we've successfully decapitated the political and military leadership, sunk most of their Navy, destroyed their Air Force, and are now going after internal targets that can allow the Iranians to threaten neighboring states, principally these intermediate range ballistic missiles. So the war is pushing the Iranians to a place where within a month we'd be running out of targets. At that point, they got to talk in some way. And we can only hope Mr. Trump doesn't make these public statements about that he wants to approve the leadership. No greater way to keep the war going than having that kind of rhetoric coming out of his mouth.
And now for the troop movement that experts think signals Trump's escalation, which, if true, will fulfill his recent statements that more lives could be lost. The Washington Post is reporting, cancellation of Army exercise fuels speculation about Mideast troop deployments. The Army in recent days abruptly canceled a major training exercise for the headquarters element of an elite paratrooper unit, officials said, fueling speculation within the Defense Department that soldiers specializing in ground combat and a range of other missions may be sent to the Middle East as the conflict with Iran widens. The 82nd Airborne Division at Fort Bragg in North Carolina includes a brigade combat team of about 4,000 to 5,000 soldiers ready to deploy on 18 hours' notice for missions as varied as seizing airfields and other critical infrastructure, reinforcing U.S. embassies, and enabling emergency evacuations. President Donald Trump has offered shifting explanations for his decision to start the conflict with Iran and said publicly that U.S. ground troops probably would not be needed as part of the ongoing campaign. At a Pentagon news briefing earlier in the day, General Dan Kane, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, declined to comment when asked about U.S. boots on the ground, saying that's a question for policymakers. As the Post reported last week, Kane had warned the White House that munitions shortfalls and a lack of broad military support from other U.S. allies would add considerable risk to any operation in Iran and to the personnel put in harm's way. The Trump administration has sought to downplay those concerns. If the administration elects to send ground forces into Iran, one early target, analysts have said, could be Karg Island. Located about 15 miles from the mainland in the Persian Gulf, the island is home to some of Tehran's most significant oil infrastructure, with about 90% of the country's oil exports moving through facilities there. A U.S. seizure of Karg Island would give the Trump administration control of a centerpiece of the Iranian economy, but leave U.S. troops vulnerable to attack. Michael Rubin, a senior fellow at the conservative American Enterprise Institute, called securing Karg Island a no-brainer and said it appears that the Trump administration appears to be coming around to the idea that Iran is a much greater problem set than perhaps they went in thinking. While U.S. troops could take incoming fire if deployed there, Rubin said capturing the island would give the United States significant strategic advantages, including potentially choking off Tehran's ability to pay its military. Still, deploying ground forces into Iran could pose significant political risk for the president, who is facing anti-war opposition from Democrats and a wing of his own Republican Party. A poll by CNN published Sunday found that 12% of respondents favor sending ground troops to Iran, while 60% oppose it and 28% are unsure. Those are highlights. For the full story, visit WashingtonPost.com. Two stories with similar themes. The general said Trump made no attempt to consult Congress or our allies and described it as a mess. And the senior fellow said, Iran is a much greater problem than Trump thought. So let's pause and take inventory. A real estate developer is our commander-in-chief, and a part-time Fox host is our Pentagon chief. What could have gone wrong?